Welcome to The Gaze. I'm glad to be with you on a digital platform of New Europe, platform where we will show you all the significant events in different regions that at the end of the day affect the world globally, and we will speak about it with our experts for you. I'm Ksenia Smirnova, and it's my show Talk for More Details, and today we will speak about nuclear safety. And we will talk about this with an independent expert on nuclear energy and safety issues, former member of the Collegium of the State Inspection of Nuclear Regulation, but it's a bit later. And firstly, we will discuss the political issue of all nuclear threats. And I'm glad to present my first guest. It is political scientist Mykola Davydiuk. Nice to see you.
Hi. Happy to see you too.
So let me start with the very interesting situation. So a month ago, you as diplomats and the other experts that I talked to were very ironic about these threats and claims of Putin, and even called that a typical bluff. And now we more and more hear some warnings, even from White House and even from the President Biden, about these intentions of Putin. So what has changed during this month, how do you think?
I think the nuclear weapon case all the time stays on the table during this war. And on like so-called secret documents, diplomatic documents of Western countries. Ukraine is still a red zone, and the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power station is also a red zone, and the possibility to be blown up and is really so high. So I think nothing changed. Just only in the media we see like a different amount of speaking about the nuclear weapons, and like sometimes Putin 2 weeks per 2 weeks, and 2 weeks he threat of nuclear weapons, 2 weeks he forget it, because people don't believe on that, and so 2 weeks threat and then 2 weeks down. So I think that, but the threat still exists from early moment when Russia invaded Ukraine and occupied 2 nuclear weapon power stations in Chernobyl and Zaporizhzhia. And all the time when Russia lose on the front line, they started to remind us about nuclear weapon, and in different ways. Strategic nuclear weapon, tactical nuclear weapon, and of course dirty bomb, and which they may strike on the Zaporizhzhia nuclear station, and that may be and also may blame Ukrainians that Ukraine did that, and what we observe with Kakhovka when they blow up a dam, and they said that's Ukraine. So we need 3 to 5 days to approve that was Russia side, and and then 1 week ago when the European Parliament voted for that was exactly Russia. So their expectation to strike on nuclear weapon and blame Ukrainians. So and that scenario also may work. And you can use your nuclear weapon doctrine. For instance, you are West and against Russia. They said no, that's Ukraine. So I think you all the time have to remember about that. If we are talking about the general citizens, and I think we are still sitting in a red zone in Ukraine and in Europe, and also I observe the behavior of China, which are a little bit angry on Russia. Then when they move a nuclear weapon from Russia to Belarus and to very close to NATO border, that's also a nuclear weapon issue, and their attitude to Zaporizhzhia station. So I think all the time we are sitting on the same place, but in media we have different reflection. And that depend what they're discussing, when Russia lose front lines, or more nuclear weapon, when Russia feels more confident, less nuclear weapon. But the nuclear weapon is the last tool, the last instrument in Russia's hands, which give them possibility not to lose.
maybe this scary voice became much louder just after this transferring the warheads in Belarus, as you mentioned right now. And it was the promise to place these tactical nuclear weapons after 7 or 8 July, but still foreign intelligence not disprove these claims. So what can you see, not from words, but from actions? And more of this, the actions or strategies of Russian government. Is there any changes in their policies, not in words, but maybe in some laws that accepted in parliament towards the threats of nuclear?
Is there really need to establish some new law? Is it like Russia
We're talking about European perception of this question? You know, law and order.
Russia just tried to spread out their nuclear weapons and cosplaying American law, and their possibility to save their and keep their nuclear weapons in Germany, in Italy, in Netherlands, and many other European countries. And Russia said, okay, we want to be like you, but you are not in the first place, and you are like the strongest democracy in the world. So you can't do like US. But we want,
and we have just Belarus for this.
Yes, and we have a small Padawan on our backyard, which we may use like a nuclear weapon yard, for instance. But that was before Prigozhin coup, and after that, what changed the situation dramatically for Putin, for Prigozhin, even for China. Atlantic wrote that he is afraid. And the same scenario may happen with him when he would try to invade Taiwan and some, for instance, nationalists, when it was in Mao time, may move to Beijing and to organize some coup, and he understood, yes, that's possible also. May happen in China, and Putin gives a higher percentage for this scenario in China, allowing do that in Moscow, because very similar political systems, and that not only make Putin weaker, that's also made weak Xi Jinping, and I think and Prigozhin changed the situation because Lukashenko, who need to be like a nuclear weapon slave in the Putin army. So we give you nuclear weapons. Okay, I have to receive. And he tried to play that was his oven, but Moscow said no, we are owners, and the territory where it will stay, that will be like a territory of embassy, that is a territory of Russia. And he said what? So you just mark a land of Belarus independence or in country and say that is our territory. And so that was very stupid, and that also shows him quite weak guy. And but now Lukashenko feel more confident, and he said so the score is 1-1. So when Putin saved Lukashenko in 2029 and during revolution, so Lukashenko said, so I save your government and I save your chair and your fantastically woman Kabayeva and your body during this time. So COP will resolve with the help of Lukashenko in different sides, maybe only in media side, but maybe not, I don't know. But he said but I also save you. So you can't behave me as with a dog and or with a cat or with a slave. And so now you have to respect Lukashenko, you have to respect Belarus. So we don't know what will be next with a nuclear weapon. So he is weak, but in their human communication, and also among the dictators, we can observe human communications in their dictator communication. So they they are not working as a boss and a young guy on the like freshman, and so like Lukashenko now become like something similar. I saved your life, man. So like you have to behave, me and my government and my country and my territory. So like that's working, because like from Rostov to Moscow is the same distance as from Belarusia to Moscow. So like the same fast track, like any other Saturday you may organize for Putin fantastic weekend with the Wagner group. So like this may move very fast, and also like Lukashenko may give a lot of weapons. So.
But it's interesting, of course, if they have the same reasons, if they would have some same reasons to use this nuclear weapon. But it's another question. As you said, they don't need a reason for anything, just to wish. So sometimes the reasons that they are pronouncing through television sound very weird. So one of them I want to demonstrate our audience. So Lavrov said that F-16s can carry nuclear weapons and threatened escalation. The White House advised the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Russian Federation, Sergei Lavrov, to withdraw Russian troops from Ukraine so as not to worry about the escalation of the war due to the transfer of F-16 fighter jets to the defense forces. John Kirby, representative of Joe Biden's administration, stated that this at a briefing. So my question is, what might be the key motivations behind the potential use of nuclear weapons by Russia? Actual and maybe, I'd say, irrational ones. And others the same, to Lukashenko and Putin.
As I observed during last week, mostly in like Saturday, and like when the COP could happen, and CNN wrote, so like Putin may become irrational, so like the risk of using nuclear weapon is higher and higher. So like he tried to play like very wise, like political hustler. So like Putin government is a gang from Peter streets. So like they all the time wanna be bad guys on the like geopolitical map, and so like. But in the same times, he wants to like to promise that his behave and is like really easy to read. So like it doesn't matter you are Biden, you are CEO, like you are maybe like Macron, and then any other like a strong political leader. But all of them are afraid when Putin become irrational. So like they know that like in this current moment you can read, you can understand, and like then they started Russian roulette, and that is like so like crazy dance and like in Russia. So I think that most people are afraid of that, and CNN wrote about that. So like that is like. Be careful with that. They said like Ukraine may be one of the winners of that situation, and like Ukrainians are so happy like observing that, and they're looking on that, so like that's good. But they say like strategically be careful. He become irrational, may use a nuclear attack. And also they, as I know, that like some West generals and political staff called to Ukrainians, and they say like don't be too active on the front line, don't win too much, because like we are afraid. And I think I'm not sure, but that is like my analytics, and that Mr. Sullivan, who planned to visit Copenhagen, and he didn't did that. So like that looks like, because like they just like just understand how Putin see on his eyes on that situation, and there's like American like very high staff personnel coming close to Russian borders. Ukrainian like attack so aggressively and massively on the front line, and like internal COPE 1917. So like everything, every side just dropping. So like he became irrational and like press a red button. So they said, no, stop. Like, okay, one scenario per one day. Putin is not so smart, is not so wise. So like for his primitive way of thinking, like one problem for one day. So like only Prigozhin, only Wagner for Saturday, and then we will decide what to do next. So like West playing with Putin, understanding that he is like really, really stupid and emotional one, and he's like very old, and they're like it's very hard to behave with that. So like they afraid of that is like really nuclear weapon state, and they're like, I think that maybe not points of to be afraid, that is the challenge. What to do with Russia, understanding that old, stupid political leader may use that unresponsibly. So that is a challenge for all the West, for Ukraine, for China and Europe. They're like, what to do with this country and this government in Russia, because like it really looks like very unresponsible and irrational, not only from Putin, but also like from the West side.
But who should be afraid most? This is the next point I want to discuss with you, because the Polish Ministry of Foreign Affairs called Russian dictator Vladimir Putin's intention to deploy nuclear weapon in Belarus a step towards drawing the country into the military machine of the aggressor country. Polish Foreign Ministry spokesman Łukasz Jasina also emphasized that this Russian plan increases tensions. Vladimir Putin's decision to place tactical nuclear weapons and means of delivery in Belarus further increases the tension associated with Russian aggression against Ukraine. This is another step towards pulling Belarus into the cogs of the Russian military machine, Jasina wrote on his Twitter. The representative of the department also emphasized that Russia's actions confirm the legitimacy and importance of NATO's defense policy in which Poland participated. And I want to say and remind the latest state of Duma deputy Konstantin Zatulin, a prominent nationalist, that said that one participant advocated dropping a nuclear bomb on Rzeszów to Poland.
Yes.
So is it the real threat to some sharp country, or you think that it's just the same play as a plain irrational, like Putin doing? So he's choosing like the cards, you know.
No, I heard about Rzeszów and Poland as the target of Russian nuclear weapon before. When Ukraine talked that we are really going to deoccupy Crimea. In on Russian side, send a message through the diplomatical line, and that they're like, we are not going to strike Ukraine, like Kiev, Donbass, and like Zaporizhzhia nuclear station, but we are going to strike on Poland or any other NATO state, and that was a message, and they work with that. So like I heard that is like I think like maybe half year ago. So that is not new. So before that was like a diplomatical secret message, and now when the Tulin talk about it, for us is a new, for like wide audience is a new message, but for politicians on the West is like reminding about that message. And I'm more than convinced that Putin playing with that. Putin too weak. It's like not only comparing with Ukraine, only 25,000 people like started to move very fastly with a like very understandable political message into Moscow. So when Moscow collapsed, Putin left the Moscow in his private jet. Political elites that's also CNN wrote like also leave the Moscow on their private jet. Simonian, she moved to Sochi, as I know. Some other propagandists just started to drink a lot on that day and couldn't work, and so like that's funny. Like so huge imperial capital as Moscow collapsed only from 25,000 people. So that is the answer, and that is the key to Putin's regime. That is the key. Like when you may just collapse it only with 25,000 people, and also I want to remark that like that wasn't like 25 people on the same line. That was line like I think like 3,000 to 5,000 people just took that they may grab 25,000 people. That was like from 2 to 5. So like that is a really small amount for political cope in Russia and changing all the political situation. So and another side they threat us like to destroy the world. So, but we need only from 2,000 to 5,000 people in Moscow. So that is the answer, and how you can use that, and also like all that people they had Russian passports. So that is Mr. Tokayev, the head of Kazakhstan, said like, sorry, Mr. Putin, that is like your internal issue. Mm-hmm. So like that's not don't call to Kazakhstan, China, any other country, Kyrgyzstan, Belarus, like that is your internal issue. So everything what like I loved like and I loved is like 2 hours on Saturday when Putin appeared on his video, said like, I understand everything. You gave me scenario 1917. So like, oh my gosh.
He's a great historian.
Oh my child, you are so smart. Like, take a cake. Like, that's funny. Like, okay, we are happy that you understand, but scenario is working. And nobody knows when they might repeat and from which side. So like, it's easier to collapse Putin regime than to afraid all the time from his nuclear weapon.
But anyways, this frightening we hear from our neighbors. For example, a couple of days ago, I talked to your colleague from Estonia, and the people are talking about this inside the country, and they're really afraid because it's a small country, even though it's the country of NATO. But anyhow,
but like in this case, like, okay. But what is the difference among like small and a big country? When you're afraid nuclear weapon is like the white don't know a border, the white don't know a size.
I mean, like, how many missiles have to be used to like, destroy the country?
I think that's not like a question about me and you, Estonia or Ukraine, and Berlin or like Paris or Kiev and Zaporizhzhia. Yeah, it's a question that like he is right in this question. That is about. And that is about the rules. Mm-hmm. What we want to see, like if somebody irresponsibly behaves with a nuclear weapon, that is an issue. Because like when they started to strike, that maybe continue only like few minutes. Few strikes from this side, few strikes from that side. That is the issue.
The situation that can be used by NATO to prevent the situation. I'm talking about Wagner, private military company, and its presence and his leader's presence in Belarus. Is it a very serious issue that requires a tough response from NATO? It was stated by Polish President Andrzej Duda. Duda said that this is one of the main issues that he hopes NATO leaders will discuss at the Vilnius summit in July. Duda thinks that the Wagner Group staying in Belarus needs certain decisions. It is difficult to say whether they will be adopted during the upcoming Vilnius summit because it is a rather complicated process, but he hopes that we will discuss it. And as well, Lithuanian President Gitanas Nausėda warns that NATO will have to strengthen its eastern flank in Belarus, except Wagner leader Evgeny Prigozhin. Here's his quote: if Prigozhin or parts of the Wagner Group ends up in Belarus with incomprehensible plans and incomprehensible intentions, it will only mean that we need to further strengthen the security of our eastern borders. And I want to ask you, from what is said, our position of Ukrainian president of Ukrainian government is very sharp. So no compromises towards NATO acceptance of Ukraine. So this summit in Vilnius and this situation of Prigozhin and Wagner Group in Belarus and the presence of nuclear weapon, hypothetically in Belarus, will it change the attitude of the countries that are doubting of given the status to Ukraine?
Macron today morning had a message, I think like mostly to Ukrainians, but also like for NATO countries, and that we have to resolve a future of Ukraine in NATO and give them a tool to achieve that. So like I think that is a good message, but like I can't observe deadlines. Mm-hmm. So like maybe like next century, maybe like 2 centuries, and because like I see like how Europe may manipulate with candidacy like of Balkan countries. So like 20 years after, like who except Croatia become a member of EU? Like nobody in there. So, but that is an issue, and they may come to you and say like, "Oh, this table is gray, but we talk about white table, so like that is a reason." And then you say like, "But we may change the table." Yes, of course, you have 5 years to change this table.
But that was
the same may happen with NATO, and that is like how to play with the Western bureaucracy. And I think Ukraine have to be bold and strong and on conversation. It's like, guys, like we are fighting, we are dying, trying to protect not only our homes, but trying to protect also your homes. And that is a message. And because like when you are sitting and making like many strategies and like NATO changes strategy against Russia, NATO changes strategy against China, NATO changes strategy against nuclear weapon, NATO changes strategy in hybrid war and conventional war. So okay, you change the 5 strategies, and we lost like 100,000 of people. So what is the difference? You're sitting in a very comfortable offices and they're like thinking about what to do like in potential future. But we are creating this future. We are defending Europe, we are defending NATO. And when NATO, I remember that days I wrote on my YouTube and the TV channel, in my YouTube channel, like when NATO asked Ukraine unofficially to say that the missile on Polish side was Ukrainian. I talked in a very early moment. They said, no, that Russia strike to Poland, but not NATO afraid. And they asked Ukraine, they begging Ukraine, they say, hey guys, just support us. Okay. Then a few weeks ago, that happened in Romania. What happened? Then in Moldova. So crazy Ukrainians missiles which strike in all the neighbors. That is stupid. So like they ask us to support them. So now we are asking them to support us. And that is not the issue of Turkey and or Hungary. And that is the countries which all the time against us. Mm-hmm. But okay, if 30 countries say the yes for us, we may talk to these countries personally and to find their yes in our negotiation. Mm-hmm. And that
it's possible?
More than convinced. Okay. More than convinced if 2 countries say no, and we say like, just give us 2 weeks. 1 week for one country and another week for another country. This war is not about Ukraine. This war is the answer to the question, in which century we will live under democracy or under dictatorship, in which system we will live. So like that you may choose in the Netherlands, in the like Germany, in the France, in the Spain, in UK, US, and any other countries, because now we are fighting for democracy. We are fighting for the rules which are so crony to them and also to us.
From far away, it may look like it's a question of survival of Ukraine and Ukrainian nations. But on the other hand, having heard the president of Lithuania and Poland and Estonia and all the neighboring countries that have a mutual border with Russian Federation, they do understand the threat to their countries. But the main question you just pointed, if Alliance and the countries of Western European countries, they really see primarily the importance of Ukraine in NATO for their security, but not NATO for Ukraine for our security. Do you see that their view of it is changing?
I see more horrible plan. Mm-hmm. If they betray us, Ukrainian government and president will lose their ratings, because like we're fighting for Europe, we are fighting for NATO, we are fighting for Ukraine. And if they betray us, it's like no NATO, no EU, so like you're an independent country, like just live and fight and okay. So Russia may change the government in like, I think in few decades, in nearest like 10, 15 years. And that European weapons will back to Europe, but with the Russian officers. Because like, is it possible that Yanukovych may back? Yes, if we lose NATO and Europe, yes. And or like some communist party or any other like political power from Russia. That's possible. the cope is possible. And like, if you are not give us a hand, so Russia may come here. And that is the answer. Like, if you are still have an attitude to Ukraine as a gray zone among your like very wealthy, rich, and so handsome countries on the West, gray zone in Ukraine, and ugly Russia on the East. So like, you will receive Russia on your territory in the nearest 10 years. But if you wanted to protect you from China, because the next war, the next global real war will be among West and China. Russia is a mess. Russia is like, as we mentioned, Lukashenko is a Padawan on a Putin yard. So Russia is a Padawan of yard of China. So like, if you wanted to fight and be strong against China, Russia have to be a gray zone among West and China. That is the answer. That is a political future of Russia. So like, that where we have to be concentrated. So that is the answer not only for Ukraine, that is the answer for West and NATO.
And Western countries should not forget that Russian president never forgive nobody, as we can see from the stories of the people who left the country with the secrets of Russian.
I think till the March of next year, you will say Russian president who? So like that
it's in our dreams.
He is weak. He is weak. This current week show us that he is like weaker. And Russian empire is a myth. That is like what I mentioned Minister of Foreign Affairs of Italy. And said like the strong and united Russia is a myth. We believed on that, but now no.
But still, you remember how he said to his audience, so we will hit the traitors in the toilets.
They may hit each other. They have like
they are already hitting each other.
140 million people. They may hit each other like from early morning till the late night.
But
so
still
like,
they have
God bless them and they give them a knives.
But still they have nuclear weapon. And I want to get back to what we started from. May I add some more information? My question is about the possible seizure of nuclear weapons in Russia. So we saw how easily Wagner passed through 600 kilometers of Russia. And how do you think, is it possible to prevent, and what scenarios might develop if our partners, our alliance, not prevent this tragic situation? In what case?
I'm sure that everybody wants to prevent a strike on Ukraine, and I can't find what they're doing on that. So like, what happened? Did they talk with him? Did they like support us, give us some protection? And others said like some strong message, like if you try to do that, so like the answer will be like that everything about like just talking blah blah blah, and they still don't believe on us, and they're like, because like the situation increasing like all the time, every second, and I think the most West countries on a position where Ukraine was last summer. So like they give us a really huge amount of weapon which we need for last summer. That's not for this current moment. So like, and now we have a new threats, nuclear weapons. They say, yes, we give you some few more Leopards. But we say like, no, now we need like protection from nuclear weapon. We need F-16. They say, yes, we know. Just give us like 1.5 years. So like everything what we receive now, we need last year. And now we have a new challenges, but they don't answer for that. So like, that is a big problem, but in the same time, I see how the Western people support us. Yeah. That is like incredible. They open their homes for Ukrainians. That was like when Ukraine entered EU, when European people open their homes and they give them like, that is your bed, that is your kitchen, like that is your food, and I share with you like everything what I have. So like that was amazing, but the politician is like, more slowly, and like that is like slow motion period in our negotiation about the money, about the weapon, about like political support and the military support. So now our new challenge and like constant challenge like nuclear weapon, what they did give us to win this war.
If they are still observing the crazy man in Kremlin playing with nuclear weapons, they still observing how Prigozhin threatened to grab this nuclear weapon. We still observing, and they still observing how Belarus is showing off that they have this nuclear weapon as well. But on the other hand, we have Zaporizhzhia nuclear plants here in Ukraine, and I want to remind our audience and you remember about that. The U.S. Senate proposed considering Russia's use of nuclear weapons against Ukraine as an attack on NATO, and possible destroying of Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plants will be the same case for them to use the power of NATO.
I read that message from Lindsey Graham. He's like fantastic one, and that is like a really strong idea. That is like really American, Western strong idea. But that, for this kind of moment, is just a draft of law. That's just a draft. So like, when they vote for that in their parliament and it's become like a really law and will be operated by NATO office, so that would be great. So that would be like a real message to Russia, to China, for everybody. They're just, guys, keep calm and forget about your nuclear weapon terrorism. And they say like, yes, we know, that is more than understandable. But for this current moment, it's just a draft, and like, but the idea and the proposition are like really brilliant, and it's really nice. And yes, he is a good guy. I love him. He came to Kyiv, so like after visiting Kyiv, like every politician in the West becomes stronger and better. So like I think we need to invite everybody here. So like and just like to make more conferences, more summits, more meetings here in the front line in Kyiv, in Kherson, in Bakhmut, and in many other cities. And that is the point. And I think like why the West is so strong is not centralized. It's not like Russia. You have Putin leave Moscow, so like Moscow collapsed. Like in democracies, like you have like hundreds of MPs. You may have like a different president, different prime ministers. You may have different, even political alliance also, like because that is institutions and that is institutions and that is a system how it works. But in Russia, you have only one man who rule everything, and then when he dies, or everything collapses, or when he leaves, and everything is collapsed. So like, I think the chance of West to win is like 10 times bigger because we are like we are not a vertical. We're like very horizontal societies, and like all the time horizontal societies win. So like I believe in that because like more brains working for victory than in their dictator side. So like that is good.
My last very short question to you will be grounding on the speech of President of Kazakhstan when he answered one of the journalists' question about if Kazakhstan needs any nuclear weapon. He said, no, we don't need nuclear weapon because we understand what's the main for us, and it's not making nuclear weapon and taking part in any war. So understandable. How do you think the world after the end of war in Ukraine and the nuclear program around the world will be just wider, or on the contrary, countries would understand how frightening it is and get back to the period of Reagan, for example?
I think the problem is not a nuclear weapon. The problem is a lack of democracy in some countries.
That's true.
If Russia re-elects Medvedev or any other president and then didn't give access to this crazy dictator to back him for like 20 or 30 years, we in this current moment we will sit in very different situation. So that is not about a weapon. That is like about a lack of democracy. So we need to invest in democracy in the world. We need to support some institutions as a freedom of speech and like political parties and many others. And that is the answer, because a weapon is a tool, how to use it to protect or to attack. And stupid dictators, of course, use it to attack. And now we need to protect. We need to work with their territories in the future. We need to change them, and we need better to prevent some problem than to resolve it. So that is the answer.
We have to pay attention to the reason, not to the consequences of what happened here. Thank you very much for this interesting conversation. And I have to remind that my guest was Mykola Davydiuk. It's a political scientist. And now, in the second part of our program, we will speak about the nuclear treaties on Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant and nuclear weapons. So stay with us. So welcome back to Talk for More Details. I'm Ksenia Smirnova, and now I'd like to talk with my next guest. It's independent expert on nuclear energy and safety issues, former member of the Collegium of the State Inspection of Nuclear Regulation. It's Olha Kosharna. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
Thank you for your time, and I would like to start with this next message. The President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, announced that Russia is considering the scenario of a terrorist attack on the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. Russian terrorists are pushing the world into the abyss of nuclear disaster. There have never been terrorist attacks on nuclear facilities, and this is categorically unacceptable. Radiation knows no boundaries. The hit targets are determined only by the direction of the wind. So this is a question of the safety of all humanity, as it was during the Chernobyl accidents. Ukraine has evidence of Russian plans, and all available information is passed on to state governments and international organizations. So from the very first day of the occupation, Russian troops have been provoking a catastrophe, mining the stations, passing military equipment and ammunition there, shelling the territory of Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. So what are the dangers that the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant carries exactly in the state in which it is now?
Well, first of all, the occupation of an operating nuclear power plant is the first time in the history of mankind. Currently, 5 power units of the ZNPP are in a state of cold shutdown. 1 power unit, number 5, not stop. ZNPP has not produced electricity since September of the 22nd year. And the most dangerous state, the fact that power unit number 5 is not switched to cold shutdown, as the State Nuclear Regulatory Inspectorate of Ukraine wrote, because they want to bring the 5th power unit to the minimum controlled capacity, in order a larger scale of radiation emissions due to the accident.
That is the Russians, you mean?
Russians, yes. There are many scenarios. General Budanov said that the protective shield in the cooler tank was mined. Yes, mined spray ponds, which are also used for cooling. It is not necessary to blow up the reactor itself. It is enough to blow up pipelines that supply water for cooling, or ponds, or splash pools, so that it is not possible to cool power units. And why the most dangerous state of the 5th power unit? Because in the cold stop, the coolant temperature of the first circuit is 70 degrees. Less water is needed for cooling, and the temperature of the coolant of the first circuit in the 5th power unit is 275 degrees. Do you understand? and therefore the difference. For example, let's imagine that there is no water for cooling. In the case of cold stop, from the moment there is no water to beginning of a serious accident with the melting of the active zone, 8 days. If there is no water for the fifth power unit, 27 hours. Accident like in Fukushima is beginning. I would like to point out that all the nuclear power plants of Ukraine have implemented instruments taking into account the lessons of Fukushima. In particular, there are hermetic envelopes. The reactor design is different from the one at the Chernobyl NPP. There are hydrogen recombinators and filters for the retention of radionuclides, right? There are enough mobile pumping stations, mobile reserve diesel generators. Undoubtedly, emissions of radioactivity as a result of a severe accident with melting of the active zone will be less than at Fukushima. Certainly. But we don't know yet. Maybe they will damage the hermetic shell, because the hermetic shell is such a roof, very strong, made of concrete, which covers the reactor. Therefore, it is necessary to prepare for the worst options, to be ready. And if they do not happen, well, it will be fine. Therefore, it is necessary to prepare.
You have now outlined the means and tools that have been taken into account in order to secure the situation in the event of a natural catastrophe. But we've heard a lot from nuclear security experts that this station was supposed to be built back in the Soviet times, and it's supposed to be so strong built that it should be able to withstand any missile strikes. Is this also an illusory perception of our security?
I'm not an expert, I'm not a military expert, but I know that they simulated a strike with a tactical nuclear weapon on the reactor. I will not tell you about the results, but it is a sufficiently strong structure, a reactor. Therefore, I think that they will do the man-made accident in a different way. It is due to the explosion of a coolant reservoir, or water pipelines, or steam pipelines. That is, they will not mine the reactor in which the nuclear fuel is located.
Another thread I heard as a non-expert, I will ask you this question: which is the most dangerous, a reactor or spent fuel repository?
Reactor. The spent fuel storage, if they mine it and blow up the containers, everything will remain at the industrial site. And in the case of a severe accident with the melting of the active zone, then gaseous radionuclides from the active zone, and the most dangerous for people, iodine 131, when the reactor is at power.
Sure, well then, let's talk about how you say it is impossible to calculate the radius there, and everything depends on conditions. But as for the countries of Europe, how much is in the affected area? We are talking only about Western European countries, or is the geography here so wide that the inhabitants, even of Germany and Netherlands, should be now aware?
For example, last year in the summer, they simulated accident with the weather conditions on a specific day. And then a radioactive cloud flew over the Krasnodar Krai, and cesium-137 fell out. Well, in the model, with the concentration of which it was not allowed to use these agricultural lands for 300 years. Why? Because it was raining. The cloud flew over the Donbass, of course, then the Krasnodar Krai, then returned to Turkey. Well, the radiation is already weaker. And there were options when the Crimea, for example, the direction of the wind is suitable Romania, Bulgaria, and so on. Therefore, it is if the reactor is operating at some power. Well, even if power unit number 5, it will not produce electricity, but it will, and it is discharged at 1% of its power. Then the accident will also be served with radiation consequences.
I lately read in professional publications that the countries of the European Union are also investigating these situations. They also make model plans and predict possible accidents. In other countries, do specialists really prepare? Do they now really realize the whole threat to their country? Do we have communication with them?
Communication is between experts. For example, in France, there is IRSN, an institute like the State Scientific and Technical Center of Nuclear and Radiation Safety, subordinated to the State Nuclear Regulatory Inspectorate of Ukraine. And we have been cooperating since the beginning of the 90s, and American experts, this is the Pacific Laboratory, Argonne National Laboratory, which are in the sphere of management of the US Department of Energy. The models are verified by the French in particular, because we have one European RODOS system implemented at our NPPs, the Ukrainian Hydrometeorological Center, and Energoatom and so on. It is calculated and verified by the French. They help. We helped the Japanese implement there. Mark Zhelezniak is now in Fukushima. Mark Zhelezniak also communicates with everyone. Everyone communicates. I don't know whether these countries are preparing to liquidate the consequences of radiation, because this is a response to a crisis situation. Each state has its own system. We also have a state crisis response system approved by the Cabinet of Ministers. But they are preparing, because the lady was there, Skvortsova, who is the head of the Federal Medical and Biological Agency of Russia. She was at the beginning, before the explosion, before the dam was blown up. And they conducted radiation protection training there. And she told the Russian media that she had opened 10 beds in the city hospital for radiation-affected patients. Well, that is, they were already preparing an information field. That is a crime announced in advance. This is Russia. That is, I start my morning by reading the Russian mass media in order to understand what they are preparing for us in order to say later. That's what we said. Here they are. That is, they shut down 105 unmanned aerial vehicles, kamikazes, in 10 days of May over the ZNPP. We see 150 paratroopers writing in notes at the IAEA, 150 paratroopers by board, 50 boats. Well, you know, it's funny. 150 paratroopers on 50 boats will land in the place where I don't even know how many Russian military. Where everything is mined, the entire coastline, around, inside. Sniper positions are equipped on the roofs of nuclear departments, mines. Well, everything is mined, and even the IAEA has admitted it.
This is completely another situation. We understand that they mostly direct their messages to their society, but we see that even though European institutions do not believe a single word that comes out from Putin and his propagandists, but we do not see a reaction to prejudice it. Everyone was very surprised by Mr. Grossi's last statement. He admitted that yet it was mined, the plant, and then he added, it's for safety. For safety from whom? Really? Well, I understand those workers from the Russian side who are there now at the plants, they're Putin's hostages. They understand all the dangers, but can't do nothing. But then what does Mr. Grossi understand? Is he also scared of Putin? And he continues to say this. Well, excuse me, it's nonsense.
Well, this is my personal opinion. But in my opinion, the Russians have some kind of hook for him. Whether he is corrupt or not, I don't know. This is what our special services should do. But the statement that I was informed that mining for defensive purposes, and who are we defending against? We are defending against the personnel of the ZNPP? Yes, there are mines. It doesn't meet safety standards, but does not affect the operation of safety systems. Well, as an engineer, I'm in shock.
Is this an absurd statement?
Absurd. Another thing, why doesn't he insist on putting Power Unit 5 into cold shutdown? He understands that this is the jurisdiction of Ukraine. There is State Nuclear Regulatory Inspectorate. It issued an order. He was at the station. He didn't say a word. Moreover, he produced Russian narratives on his website. The Russians explained to him, we need steam to process wastewater from washing overalls and for air conditioning. So we have to weigh safety issues and radiation consequences and wastewater. Well, collect them in some containers. Well, that's all. That's why I've been speaking out very sharply lately, because concerns. The UN Security Council also expressed concerns on June 23. Therefore, the absolute helplessness of international organizations, OSCE, UN Security Council, IAEA, it needs a full reorganization after we win. And that's why, in my opinion, we can't count on the International Red Cross or anything. Only the armed forces of Ukraine, the people of Ukraine, and patriotic personnel.
I just want to summarize that has been said before it happened at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. Did you read his statements, not only about Ukraine, but on the other possible risks? Is he a smart person? Is he a professional person? Is his expertise in his statements differ from what he's saying now about the Ukrainian situation?
He is not an engineer. He is a diplomat by education.
But there are specialists
Yes, there are
around him.
specialists, but the specialist is his deputy Chudakov, the Russian who managed the department in the deputy general director of the IAEA, Chudakov. He heads the Department of Nuclear Energy. When they go with a mission, we had the right to agree on candidates, and true condition of Ukraine was that no citizen of Russia, and even the countries that are governed, there are satellites, for example, some. But this is not normal. That is, I am in favor of limiting the rights and privileges of Russia in the IAEA, that it should not be in the board of governors of the IAEA. And I believe that Grossi should not be elected for a second term at the General Conference in September of this year. This is a great diplomatic work of our diplomats, should be with partners, because the organization is huge. And it is necessary there to work in addition to our strategic partners who understand. There are countries in Africa, Asia, and Latin America that live in another world.
We have one more very interesting neighbor, Hungary, and Viktor Orban. And the latest information is that together with Russia, they are building a nuclear power plant. But this situation may someday be used by Putin if Orban or Orban's successor does not follow the path that Russia wants. What is the threat to European countries?
It's a miracle for me. How did they give permission for construction using Russian technologies? Yes, this is an additional leverage for blackmailing the European Union. Rosatom has always been,
Let's say corrupt.
Corrupt. They bribed politicians and, accordingly, nuclear scientists in European countries, in those countries that use nuclear fuel for the operation of nuclear power plants, build it on the Soviet projects, for example, and other things. I have no doubt that this will be an additional leverage. And that's why, when, for example, I have a French journalist take comments on Radio France, its state, I said, why has France not applied economic sanctions until now? Like Great Britain, Canada, like the USA, like Ukraine towards Russia. Why did you buy services of Russian nuclear fuel cycle for 800 million euros in the 22nd year, when there in the 22nd year and in the 21st it was for 19 millions? Well, you have made a reserve, now make sanctions. Aren't you afraid? You produce 70% of electricity at nuclear power plants. Are you not afraid of terrorists? Aren't you afraid? Therefore, it is a strange situation in the European Union that until now the decision is taken by consensus. Why can't the European Union adopt the sanctions against Rosatom in a consolidated manner? I suggest that European countries decide to individually apply sanctions, each country against Rosatom, and personal sanctions against management and staff who was at the ZNPP during this time.
I thank you very much for this interesting conversation. I hope that our viewers from different countries will listen to your words and hear them. And they definitely have the opportunity to influence their governments in order to make important decisions and on time. And it's even better to do it in advance so that we don't have to spend 300 years in a row. Thank you very much. Let me remind you that the guest of our show was Olha Kosharna, an independent expert on nuclear energy and safety issues of the state nuclear regulatory inspection. Now, thank you for your time to be with us. I'm Ksenia Smirnova, and it's my show Talk for more details. Join the gaze, and thank you for your trust. See ya.